Hey, this is Joel Baker with American Giants, another weekly episode about Muffler Men. I wanted to go back and revisit something I talked about very early on, and on August 1st, 2013, I released the third episode of the original series of American Giants on YouTube. And in that episode, I talked about the different kinds of Muffler Men and the distinctions between them, how you can look at them and know what you're looking at, and even know if it's an older model or a newer model, and all those little things. And I've learned a few things over the years, so I thought it would be good for this week to go back and redo one of those episodes, so we can check out each kind that International Fiberglass made and know how to recognize them and know what we're looking at. We will start with the classic Bunyan because he was the first one made, and between Pruitt Fiberglass and International Fiberglass, this was the most produced Muffler Man and the most common. All subsequent versions of the Muffler Man were made from the original Paul Bunyan mold. When you visit a Muffler Man, there are some things that you can look for to help you know what you are looking at. Bunions are unique in that they have big lumberjack boots and pant legs tucked into the top of the boots. Another common trait on the bunions that often goes unnoticed is the small line just below the knee. The mold for the bunion legs had multiple pieces, and so the joining line can normally be found just below the knee. In very old versions that were made pre-1965, you can also see another joining line just below the suspender buttons. Sometimes they did not get everything lined up just right, and we have found zippers that don't properly align. The classic Bunyan has suspender buttons that are at the top of the pants, and there are 4 of them in the front and none in the back. The Bunyan torso and waist were bolted together with an angled bracket system that was fiberglassed in. When these brackets rust out, there is often a separation at the waist that can become a growing problem. The torso for the Bunyan is much like the torso on other versions, but a great way to identify how old a Giant is by looking at the way the arm fits into the sleeves. An older version will have a more natural look, and the arms will slip in a natural way under the sleeves. A Bunyan or Muffler Man made after 1967 or 1968 will have a distinct looking sleeve that is a bit odd shaped, but that can more easily receive the arm and bolt it more securely into the Giant. A Bunyan will always have a beard and a knit cap that is part of the head mold. To top it off, International Fiberglass made a large axe that the Giant could hold. These were often stolen, and the company had a good side business going in just making replacement axes. Colors were always blue pants, red shirt, and a yellow hat with black beard and shoes. The first version International Fiberglass made off the Bunyan was what we call a standard or serviceman. This was achieved by removing the beard and the knit cap from the original head and making new molds. Servicemen were often used at gas stations or modified slightly to serve Midas shops, mobile gas stations, and even restaurants like Waffle House. A few different hats were made to turn a standard Muffler Man into a golfer or a soda jerk serving burgers. The possibilities were almost endless, and by changing out a hat and getting rid of the beard, a whole new character could be made to fit any business. The standard version often had cowboy pants or pants where the pant leg fell all the way to the top of the shoe. Unlike the Bunions, the standard versions often had the International Fiberglass stamp on their legs. The Cowboy version was basically a standard version, but always had the International Fiberglass logo on their legs, and you won't find the seams or the joining lines on Cowboys like you do on the Bunyan legs. By the time International Fiberglass was making Cowboys for Phillips 66, they had made a 2-piece mold of the legs, and there are no lines on those legs, and they are very smooth. The Cowboys were mostly made for Phillips 66 gas stations, but a few appeared at amusement parks and restaurants like the famous Jay's Steakhouse in Boise. A large cowboy hat was added to the head, and some cowboys even had a 6-shooter on their hip, but this had to be purchased extra. The gun-carrying cowboys also came with a belt. A few cowboys were given a bow tie, which was a feature International Fiberglass added to their cowboy and standard line of Muffler Men upon the request of the customer. Bow tie versions were used by Gulf Oil, Mr. Bendo versions were basically standard versions, but came with a beard and an altered shoulder that allowed a unique raised right arm that could hold something or have an open waving palm. The left arm hung down straight at their side, or in some cases was the standard bent arm and could hold a tire. These giants were used by muffler shops that were advertising that they could bend muffler pipes. Muffler Men were created in the 1960s, and so if you are going to have cowboys, you also need some Native American Indians, and demand was high back in those days. So high, in fact, that International Fiberglass made 3 different versions of the Indian. The first one was the chief that came with a unique head sporting a full headdress. The torso was changed to reveal a bare chest and not the standard shirt, and the same arms were used as a Mr. Bendo would have for the Indian versions. Standard cowboy pants were used with the International Fiberglass logo appearing on the leg, but special moccasins were added instead of the standard Muffler Man shoe. The Indian Brave version only had 1 to 3 feathers and a slightly different head shape that looked less fierce, but was identical in all other aspects to the chief. The third Indian version were tomahawk versions, and were just like the Braves but came with a few extras like ruffles on the pant legs and a loincloth around the waist and a tomahawk clutched in the left hand. This version also had a necklace around the neck, and in some cases an extremely long headdress was added to the back. The Snerd was a unique version of Muffler Man that was a popular model at International Fiberglass. It was made by either using cowboy legs or Bunyan legs and a standard torso. The giant had a completely unique head that International Fiberglass called Mortimer Snerd, but most people associate it with Alfred E. Newman. It was a jug-eared, goofy-grinned country bumpkin with less than perfect intelligence, and these sold very well. Patches were painted on the legs to give the impression the character was poor and a drifter, and these giants were sold in a number of different arm configurations. Sometimes they even held golf clubs and stood at putt-putt courses. The pants were always blue, but the shirt could come in yellow or red, and the giant always had a large brimmed hat. Sometimes these hats were cut and altered to look like a ball cap instead. The Snerd also came with suspenders. It's hard to label Muffler Men sometimes because customers could alter their giants to get exactly what they wanted. Sometimes, greatly modified creations were made, like the Frankenstein for haunted trails in Chicago, the coal miner in Helper, Utah, and a Jesse James character that stood long ago in Sullivan, Missouri, for a theme park. Other modifications also turned Muffler Men into spacemen with a very unique space helmet. 3 were made that we know of, and only 1 of those still stands today. Pirates were also made, adding a pirate hat and an eye patch and a unique-looking pant legs to create another version. A few other giants should be mentioned here that did not follow the standard mold or look of Muffler Men, but they are certainly part of the family. International Fiberglass made a smaller 14-foot Bunyan version that was heavily used by the Lombard Chainsaw Company. They also made a female Muffler Man used by Uniroyal Tire, and she could come in a bikini or an optional shirt and skirt. She held the sign in her raised hand, although none of those are known to have survived. You can find the International Fiberglass stamp at the bottom of her skirt if you look closely. A Viking was also made that was used to advertise kitchen carpet by the Viking Carpet Company. These giants were heavily used, but the kitchen carpets did not sell well, so the use of the giants was short-lived. Most of these Vikings ended up at elementary and high schools. They came with a giant shield and a roll of carpet. International Fiberglass made many giants and figures that you can identify easily on your travels. The Waving Giant was a large 22-foot fiberglass giant that came with a long-sleeve shirt and dress pants. An optional bow tie or necktie could be added, as well as an entire suit coat and top hat if desired. These are a very rare find today, and only a few have survived. International Fiberglass also made a Pioneer Man that came in a seated position, and these were used by the Wagon Ho restaurant chain, mostly in the South. Another figure was made for Tony's Pushcart, a short-lived food cart idea that utilized a large fiberglass giant at one end of the small building. Only one of these versions remains today, along with a few scattered hats that survived. So that's always a fun journey. Over the years, I've explained this again in emails and in different talks I've done, but it's been a long time since I've done an episode, so that was a lot of fun to go back and do that again. And these days, things have changed, right? It's not just what Muffler Man is this that International Fiberglass made. Is this an International Fiberglass original, or is it a remake? With Bell Plastics and Mark Klein, there have been lots and lots of additions, especially from Mark Klein over the last few years, and he's gotten molds now for a number of different giants, including the Uniroyal Girl. So that's all great, and I think it all helps bring awareness to Muffler Men and increase the lure behind and the desire for people to visit them. But I think it's important to know, hey, am I looking at an original here, or am I looking at something Mark Klein made last year? If you like all these details and all these facts, make sure you check out or join our Patreon page. I have been moving a lot of my stuff into Patreon, so I am putting new content on there. And, if you like all the numbers of how many giants there are of every kind, you're going to be seeing that come into Patreon. There's extra videos. They come early. And so just you may want to check that out, but always enjoy the free content on the website as well as the YouTube channel. And we'll see you again next week.